Hey guys, tonight we dive into the shadowy world of Viking war, exploring why those fierce Norsemen supposedly drank from the skulls of their fallen enemies. Picture this, you're trudging through a snow-swept fjord under a moonlit sky, the crunch of frost under your boots echoing like a whispered warning, as the distant roar of a feast hall calls you and torches flickering like hungry eyes, promising warmth, but hiding secrets that might just chill your bones. You probably won't survive this tale without questioning every mead horn you've ever seen in a museum. But hey, that's the fun of history's darker corners. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Alright, let's slip into the mist of the past. You push open the heavy oak door of the long hall, and the warmth hits you like a wave from the sea god Aegir himself. The air is thick with the scent of roasting boar, mingled with the sharp tang of fermented honey mead, and the earthy smoke from the central fire pit that stretches the length of the room. Flames dance and crackle, casting long shadows on the timber walls adorned with carved runes and shields scarred from battles long past. Around you, burly warriors and their kin huddle on benches lined with furs, their laughter booming like thunder, while skalds strum lyres and murmur verses that weave tales of glory and gore. Your boots thud softly on the rush-strewn floor as you weave through the crowd, finding a spot near the high seat where the chieftain holds court, his beard braided with silver rings that glint in the firelight. The hall buzzes with energy, a place where the living toast the dead and the gods alike. You feel the pulse of it all, clink of drinking horns being raised, the spill of golden liquid catching the light, and the low hum of conversations that dip into whispers when the stories turn dark. One grizzled veteran leans in close to his companion, his voice a gravelly murmur that carries just enough for you to catch. In the old days, after a raid, we'd quaff ale from the very skulls of our foes, letting their spirits fuel our own. You chuckle, and worldly modern movies love that image, don't they? Vikings chugging from polished crania like some barbaric chalice. But as you settle in, you sense there's more to this legend, a thread pulling back to ancient sagas where truth and myth entwine like the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree. As the feast unfolds, you grab a horn, yourself curved and polished, tipped with metal to keep the drink from leaking out the bottom. It's filled to the brim with mead, sweet and heady, warming your insides as you take a sip. The mainstream historical fact here is that these halls were the heart of Viking social life. Excavations from sites like the one at Trelleborg in Denmark show longhouses up to 100 feet long, where communities gathered for everything from legal assemblies to winter feasts, strengthening bonds over food and drink. But tonight, the air feels charged with something quirkier, a fringe tidbit whispered among the elders. Some say the first hints of skull drinking came not from actual bones, but from poetic kennings in old verses, where skulls might just mean the base of animal horns, twisted by time and translation into something far grislier. Historians still argue whether any Viking ever truly lifted an enemy's cranium to their lips, or if it's all a romantic exaggeration born from fearful chroniclers' pens. You lean back against a post carved with serpents, the wood smooth under your fingers, and listen as the skald begins a tale, his voice dropping to that soothing ASMR whisper cadence that makes your eyelids heavy even as your pulse quickens. Gather close, he says, for this is the saga of fierce warriors and the shadows that haunt their victories. The hall quiets a bit, the fire popping like punctuation, and you can't help but smirk at the center you are imagining yourself in chainmail. But really, if a real Viking feast got too rowdy, you'd probably spill your mead and blame it on a Draugr ghost. Joke's on us modern folks. We'd last about 5 minutes before begging for a straw. The chieftain, a broad-shouldered man with eyes like storm clouds, raises his horn high. To Odin, the All-Father, who hung from the tree for wisdom. The crowd echoes the toast, and you join in, the mead sliding down smooth. But that mention of the tree lingers, a hint of the sacrifices to come. You glance around, noticing how the revelers' faces glow in the firelight, their scars telling silent stories of raids across the seas. One woman, her hair braided with beads, passes you a platter of salted fish and bread, her smile wry as she quips, "Eat hearty." Stranger tomorrow's battle might make this your last meal. You laugh softly, the sarcasm gentle in her tone, but it reminds you of how precarious life was back then. Every feast a defiance against the cold unknown. As the night deepens, the whispers grow bolder. That veteran from earlier spins his yarn further. It started with the blood of enemies, spilled in honor of the gods, but some warriors, they say, took it a step beyond, crafting goblets from the defeated's heads to mock death itself. You tilt your head, intrigued, the sensory overload wrapping around you like a woolen cloak, the heat pressing close, the murmur of voices blending into a lullaby rhythm, the taste of honey lingering on your tongue. Another light joke bubbles up in your mind. If Vikings really drank from skulls, imagine the cleanup, no dishwasher in sight, just a quick rinse in the fjord and hope no bits linger. But beneath the merriment, you sense the legend's roots digging deep, tied to rituals older than the hall itself. The quirky bit surfaces again in your thoughts, in some fringe accounts, like those muddled translations from Danish scholars centuries later. A simple phrase about curved branches from skulls meaning animal horns get warped into this macabre custom, spreading like wildfire through European folklore. And the debate rages on. Some scholars point to archaeological finds of modified bones, wondering if ritual use extended to drinking, while others dismiss it as pure invention, a way for outsiders to paint the Norsemen as savages. You shift on the bench, the fire's warmth making your limbs heavy, the ASMR quality of the skull's voice pulling you deeper into the immersion. The hall feels alive, a vessel for these whispers, where every toast hints at the why behind the skull drinking myth, perhaps a symbol of conquering fear, or a poetic boast gone literal. As meat flows and stories swirl, you realize this feast is just the beginning, the legends breathing life into the night, ready to unfold their secrets one sip at a time. The mead's warmth lingers in your veins as the hall's revelry fades into a distant hum, pulling you out like a tide under the moon. You step into the crisp night air, boots crunching on gravel paths leading away from the longhouse, toward the flickering torches of the returning raid party. Hooves thunder softly in the distance, growing louder as warriors crest the hill, their silhouettes jagged with spears and axes, cloaked in the scent of salt spray and blood. You join them at the edge of the village, heart pounding in that quiet anticipation, the stars above winking like indifferent gods as the victors dismount, their faces smeared with grime and grins that speak of hard-won glory. The air turns metallic, heavy with the aftermath of battle, sweet-soaked leather, the faint copper tang of wounds hastily bound, and the earthy musk of horses lathered from the ride. You fall in step with a group of them, a burly axe-wielder named Bjorn clapping you on the back with a laugh that rumbles like distant thunder. Stranger, you miss the fun, waves crashing, swords singing, and foes crumpling like autumn leaves. His voice drops to that soothing whisper, drawing you closer as they unload their spoils, sacks of silver from distant monasteries, bolts of fine cloth shimmering in the torchlight, and yes, the gruesome trophies that make your stomach twist just a bit. Heads of the defeated, severed in the heat of combat, now carried on poles or bundled in cloaks, symbols of triumph that the warriors handle with a mix of reverence and rough jest. You watch as one is placed near the fire pit outside the hall, the flames licking shadows across hollow eyes, and you can't help but think, modern folks would faint at this as with our sanitized history books, pretending war was ever clean. As the group gathers around the blaze, you huddle in, feeling the heat chase away the night's chill, the crackle of wood a rhythmic lullaby. Stories spill out like mead from an overturned horn. How the raid on a Saxon village turned the tide when Odin's ravens circled overhead, a sign of favor. The mainstream historical fact settles in Hera. Viking raids weren't just piracy, they were economic engines, with sites like the one at Lindisfarne in 793 marking the start of the Viking Age, where Norsemen targeted wealthy monasteries for gold and slaves, fueling their society's expansion across Europe. But tonight, the focus sharpens on those trophies, the heads becoming centerpieces for rituals that blend celebration with the sacred. One warrior, his voice a gentle murmur laced with sarcasm, quips, "Nothing says victory like toasting with your enemy's gaze upon you saves on buying new cups." 2. You chuckle softly, the joke lightening the macabre air, though your skin prickles at the thought. You reach out tentatively, fingers brushing the rough texture of a captured shield, its boss dented from blows, while the warriors begin the grim work of preparing their prizes. Skulls stripped clean, perhaps boiled in cauldrons over the fire, transformed from mere remains into emblems of power. The quirky tidbit whispers through the group like a fringe legend. Some tales claim these skulls weren't always for drinking but for divination, where runes carved into bone foretold future raids. A practice echoed in obscure Greenlandic finds where modified crania suggest shamanic uses beyond the battlefield. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or just isolated eccentricity, debating if the sagas exaggerate for dramatic flair or if archaeology hints at a darker truth buried in bog-preserved sites. The fire pops, sending sparks dancing upward like fleeing spirits, and you lean closer, the ASMR cadence of Bjorn's storytelling wrapping around Yoa's words slow, deliberate, each syllable a soft brush against the night. "See here," he says, holding up a trophy with care. "This one's from a chieftain who thought his god would save him. Now his essence fuels our rites." You nod, the sensory details immersing you, the sizzle of fat dripping into flames from roasting meat nearby, the cool breeze carrying hints of pine from the surrounding woods, the distant hoot of an owl that feels like a watchfly. Another joke slips in as a young warrior mimics drinking from an imaginary skull, spilling water down his chin. "Cheers to the dead, may they not haunt our hangovers." The group erupts in quiet laughter, the sarcasm gentle, easing the tension as mead horns are passed around once more. But the ritual deepens. You watch as they chant low invocations to Odin, the All-Father, who knows the value of sacrifice. Blood from a fresh kill is daubed on the trophies, a callback to the hall's toasts, linking feast and field in an unbroken chain. You feel the pull of it, the why behind the legend starting to crystallize. Drink from skulls, if it happened, wasn't mere brutality but a way to absorb an enemy's strength, to mop fate and claim immortality through memory. The modern aside hits you. Imagine posting that on social media today, Viking vibes, but with a filter to hide the gore. We'd get cancelled faster than a longship in a storm. As the night wears on, the warriors' voices blend into a drowsy harmony, the fire's glow softening edges, making the trophies seem almost ceremonial art rather than remnants of violence. You sit cross-legged on the ground, the grass cool and damp beneath you, inhaling the smoky air that clings to your clothes like a second skin. One more light joke bubbles up from the group, a grizzled veteran eyeing a particularly large skull. "This one could hold enough mead for 2 feasts. Pity the headache it'd give." The chuckles fade into sighs, the cadence slowing, pulling you towards sleep even as the rituals continue. The quirky fringe returns in whispers, accounts from Byzantine chroniclers, those outsiders peering in with wide eyes, describing Varangian guards who allegedly fashioned skullcups as badges of honor, though whether truth or tall tale remains foggy. And the debate lingers. Scholars pore over texts, like the Orkney in the saga, questioning if drinking from the curved horns of skulls meant literal bone or metaphorical prowess, with no grave goods yet confirming the practice outright. You stretch your legs, the warmth seeping into your bones, the scene a bridge from hall to deeper mysteries. The warriors begin to drift back inside, but you linger, eyes on the fire, sensing how these trophies tie into greater sacrifices, echoes of trees, and gods waiting in the shadows beyond. The fire's embers glow faintly as you rise, drawn by an invisible thread through the shadows, your footsteps soft on the dew-kissed grass leading away from the village toward the ancient grove. The night air cools your skin, carrying whispers of wind through the leaves, and soon the massive ash tree looms before you, its branches sprawling like the arms of a giant embracing the stars. Yggdrasil's echo, they call it world tree, axis of the 9 realms where gods and mortals blur in sacrifice. You stand beneath its canopy, the trunk rough and ancient under your palm, bark etched with runes that seem to pulse faintly in the moonlight, as if alive with the All-Father's secrets. The ground around it is hallowed, scattered with offerings, faded ribbons, small bones, and carved stones half buried in the earth, the scent of moss and damp wood wrapping around you like a forgotten dream. You tilt your head back, gazing up at the swaying limbs, feeling the weight of legend settle on your shoulders. Here in this sacred spot, Odin's tale unfolds in your mind like a skald's hushed recital how the one-eyed god, seeker of wisdom, hung himself from this very tree for 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, neither eating nor drinking, until the runes revealed themselves from the depths, his sacrifice, of voluntary death and rebirth, to grasp the mysteries that bind fate. You can almost hear the creak of the rope, the god's labored breaths fading into the wind, and it ties directly to those warrior rites you glimpsed earlier, where victory's trophies become vessels for honoring such divine endurance. Modern folks might call it extreme yoga for enlightenment, but back then, it was the price of power. Imagine Odin scrolling through self-improvement TikToks, day 9, still hanging runes incoming, like if you're wiser than me. As you circle the tree slowly, leaves rustling in a soothing ASMR rhythm that makes your eyelids droop, the details sharpen. The mainstream historical fact roots deep. Norse mythology's tree sacrifice draws from real pagan practices, evidenced by bog bodies like Toland man in Denmark, ritually killed and preserved around the Viking Age's dawn, suggesting human offerings to fertility gods or Odin himself to ensure bountiful raids and harvests. But tonight, under the Eshe's shade, the link to skull-drinking whispers clear. Warriors emulating Odin's ordeal by ritually consuming from enemy remains, absorbing not just strength but wisdom, turning defeat into a sacrament that echoes the gods hanging. You lean against the trunk, the wood cool and steady, inhaling the fresh, loamy air mingled with a faint herbal tang from nearby wildflowers, your mind drifting like the branches above. A quirky tidbit surfaces in the quiet, like a fringe echo from forgotten lore. Some lesser-known Eddas hint that Odin's ravens, Hugin and Munin, pecked at sacrificial skulls hung from Yggdrasil's boughs, their beaks dipping into hollows as if drinking knowledge directly. A poetic precursor to the Viking custom that blurred bird myth with human ritual. Historians still argue whether this hanging rite inspired literal skull goblets or if it was symbolic, a metaphor for enlightenment through pain. With no direct artifacts proving warriors quaffed from crania during tree ceremonies, perhaps it was all skaldic flair to intimidate foes. You sink to the ground, back against the tree, the grass soft and slightly damp, cradling you as the night's cadence slows your breath. The sarcasm slips in gently. If Odin could see us now binge-watching history docs instead of hanging for wisdom, he'd probably roll his one eye and mutter, "Mortals and their shortcuts," a light joke to ease the solemnity. Picture the All-Father after his ordeal. 9 days without mead. Next time, I'll just ask Google. The grove feels intimate, alive with subtle sounds, a distant owl's call, the whisper of wind through leaves like pages turning in an ancient book, and the faint rustle of small creatures in the underbrush, all blending into a lullaby that pulls you deeper into the immersion. As you sit there, fingers tracing a rune on the bark, perhaps Ansu's for divine breath, the connection strengthens. Warriors, fresh from battle, would bring their trophies here, hanging them from branches as offerings, mirroring Odin's self-sacrifice. You'd watch the rite unfold in your imagination, the chieftain intoning prayers, the skull swaying gently, catching moonlight in its empty sockets, while mead is poured over it, trickling down as if the dead themselves drank in Valhalla. The sensory pull is strong, chill seeping through your cloak, the earthy taste of the air on your tongue, the tree's presence a silent guardian. Another modern aside. We'd turn this into a wellness retreat today. Hang with Odin. 9 nights to Nirvana, complete with yoga mats and herbal Tino spears required. The ASMR quality deepens as imaginary winds hush through the canopy, each leaf a soft stroke, inviting drowsiness even as the legend captivates. You recall how this tree links to the why of it all, drinking from skulls as a rite of passage, claiming the enemy's essence to gain Odin's favor, turning mortality into mockery. A third joke bubbles up, light and sleepy. If Vikings shopped for skull cups, it'd be like this one's got great capacity, holds a full saga's worth of mead. The chuckles fade into the night. The grove's peace enveloping you, callbacks to the hall's feasts, and battlefield trophies weaving a tapestry where every ritual branches from this sacred ash. But the fringe lingers, quirky tales from oral traditions claiming some shamans drank hallucinogenic brews from tree-hung skulls to commune with Odin. Visions blurring realms in a way that mainstream sagas only hint at. And the scholarly debate persists, with experts divided on whether archaeological tree pits in Uppsala truly held human sacrifices or if Christian chroniclers amplified the gore to demonize pagans. You stretch out on the grass, the stars peeking through leaves like scattered runes, the tree's shadow a comforting blanket. The night's mysteries unfold slowly, each breath sensing with the grove's rhythm, leading you toward discoveries hidden in the sagas, where tree and skull entwine in eternal rite. Your eyes flutter open to the first hints of dawn filtering through the ash tree's leaves, a soft gray light that turns the grove into a dreamlike haze, pulling you gently from your rest on the grass. The air is cooler now, laced with the fresh scent of morning dew and the faint, sweet rot of fallen leaves. As you push yourself up, brushing dirt from your cloak, something stirs in the underbrush, a rustle that draws your gaze deeper into the woods, where shadows cling to a cluster of ancient oaks and birches, their trunks twisted like guardians of secrets long buried. You follow the pull, footsteps muffled on the soft earth, heart beating a steady rhythm that echoes the ASMR whisper of wind through branches. Each step uncovering layers of the hidden grove where sacrifices whisper from the past. As you push through a thicket of ferns, their fronds brushing your legs like silky fingers, the clearing reveals itself, a sacred site ringed by stones etched with faded runes, and at its center, more trees adorned with offerings that make you pause, breath catching in your throat. Skulls animal, and perhaps more dangle from low branches on leather thongs, swaying gently like macabre wind chimes, their hollows catching the light in eerie glints. Nearby, altars of flat rock bear remnants of rituals, dried bloodstains, scattered herbs, and carved wooden idols staring blankly skyward. The mainstream historical fact grounds you hear. Archaeological digs at sites like Gamla Uppsala in Sweden have uncovered mass sacrifice pits from the Viking Age, where hundreds of humans and animals were offered to the gods during great blots, festivals that ensured victory in battle and fertility for the land, tying directly to the warrior culture you glimpsed on the battlefield. You step closer, the ground spongy underfoot, inhaling the musty tang of moss and old wood, feeling the grove's energy hum like a distant lullaby. This discovery mirrors tales from the sagas, where explorers stumble upon such places, linking the tree's boughs to the why of skull-drinking offerings hung high, their essences drained in honor of Odin, perhaps inspiring warriors to quaff from similar vessels as a way to commune with the divine. A quirky tidbit flits through your mind, fringe and fascinating. In some obscure saga fragments, these grove sacrifices included talking heads, oracles crafted from enemy skulls propped on stakes, whispered to reveal prophecies when mead was poured through them, a blend of necromancy and ritual that feels more like a Viking Ouija board than history. Historians still argue whether these groves were widespread pagan temples or exaggerated in Christian retellings to portray Norsemen as heathens, with no consensus on how often skulls played a central role beyond symbolic hangings. The light strengthens, casting long shadows that dance across the offerings, and you reach out to touch it, dangling bone-smooth and weathered, cool against your skin like handling a relic from a forgotten museum. Modern asides creep in. If this were a theme park attraction, it'd be Sacrifice Grove. Enter if you dare, complete with fog machines and overpriced souvenirs. But here, it's raw, unfiltered, making you appreciate your cozy bed back home. A light joke eases the tension, imaging a Viking priest tripping over a Rupnid ritual. Odin's beard, not again sacrifice postponed due to clumsiness. The sarcasm is gentle, wrapped in that sleepy cadence, as if the grove itself murmurs the punchline. You wander the perimeter, eyes tracing the ropes and chains that secure the sacrifices, callbacks to Odin's hanging pulling you deeper into the connection. Warriors would bring their battlefield trophies here, stringing them up as you see now, letting the gods claim the spirits while the living toasted below. Perhaps from hollowed remains that blurred the line between offering and indulgence. The sensory immersion deepens, bird songs starting softly overhead, a chorus that blends with the creak of branches, the faint drip of dew from leaves like nature's own ASMR track, lulling your thoughts into a rhythmic flow. Another joke slips in, light and wry. If skulls were the original eco-friendly cups, Vikings were ahead of their time, reusable, biodegradable, and with a built-in intimidation factor. As you kneel by an altar, fingers sifting through scattered ashes that feel gritty and cool, the legend's roots take hold. This discovery in the sagas often comes to wanderers like you, revealing how tree offerings fed into the custom, skulls becoming portals for divine favor, drunk from to seal pacts with the All-Father. The quirky fringe resurfaces in whispers from the wind, tales of blood eagles carved not on bodies but sketched on tree bark near sacrifices, a ritual where patterns mimicked wings. And mead from skulls was sipped to invoke flight to Valhalla, whether fact or fever dream remained shadowy. And the debate endures, scholars poring over saga manuscripts, questioning if these groves inspired literal drinking rites or if the imagery was poetic license, amplified by later poets to thrill audiences. You rise slowly, the grove's peace enveloping you like a warm blanket, the ASMR whispers of leaves and distant streams slowing your pulse, inviting a yawn that you stifle with a smile. The modern world feels distant, but a sarcastic aside grounds you. We'd probably turn this site into a yoga studio today. Find your inner Odin, hang out and chill, ignoring the historical wait for Instagram likes. One more joke for the path ahead. Picture a squirrel nicking a sacrifice. Hey, that's my offering. The thief ruins the rite. The connections weave tighter, tree sacrifices linking to the hall's feasts, and battlefield glories, each discovery a step toward understanding why the Vikings might have lifted those grim goblets. As morning birds flit through the branches, their calls a gentle wake-up, you feel the pull onward. The saga's verses waiting to unfold in poetic death songs that echo these hidden rites. The morning light strengthens, bird song fading into a distant melody as you leave the grove behind, drawn by an unseen call along a winding path that snakes toward the coast. Weaves crash softly in the distance, their rhythm sensing with your footsteps on the pebbled trail, until you reach a rocky outcrop overlooking the fjord, where a lone skald sits cross-legged, his lyre resting on his knee. The sea breeze carries the salty tang of brine, mingling with the faint smoke from a small fire where he warms his hands, his cloak fluttering like a banner in the wind. You settle nearby on a smooth boulder, the stone cool beneath you as he nods in greeting, his eyes twinkling with the weight of stories untold. Without a word, he plucks the strings, the notes low and haunting, pulling you into the verses of Ragnar Lodbrok's death song, a poetic lament that echoes the sacrifices you've witnessed, decoding layers where skulls and curved branches intertwine in sub-imagery. The skull's voice rises gently, a soothing ASMR whisper that weaves through the air like mist over water, each word deliberate and drawn out to lull your senses. We struck with our swords, he intones, recounting Ragnar's final moments in the snake pit, bound by his enemies yet unbroken, his song a tapestry of battles won and fates embraced. You lean in, the lyre's vibrations humming through the ground, feeling the saga's pulse as imagery unfolds. Ragnar boasting of feasts where he drank from the curved branches of skulls, a phrase that lingers, branching back to the grove's offerings, and Odin's tree, suggesting those hollowed trophies weren't just hung but perhaps lifted in toasts, absorbing the essence in a rite that mocks the vanquished. The mainstream historical fact anchors this. Ragnar Lodbrok, semi-legendary king of the 9th century, inspired real Viking expansions, with his son's great heathen army invading England in 865, as chronicled in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, turning personal sagas into catalysts for historical migrations. Waves lap at the rocks below, their foam whispering secrets, and you close your eyes, letting the cadence wash over you, the skald's tone relaxed yet edged with sarcasm, as if Ragnar himself chuckles at mortality from beyond. In halls of the slain, the curved branches bend, he continues, decoding the poetry where skulls evoke enemy heads, and curved branches hint at drinking horns sprouting from them, or perhaps the gnarled limbs of Yggdrasil, where sacrifices dangled, blending the literal and the metaphorical in a drink that seals warrior legacies. A modern aside drifts in. Imagine Ragnar dropping this as a rap battle closer today. Sip from your skull, now your history's full viral head, but with zero auto-tune, just pure saga swag. You smile faintly, the wind tussling your hair like a gentle stroke, the sensory pull strong with each salty gust, and the lyre's soft plucks. As the verses deepen, you trace patterns in the saga's Wyveriner's song, Krákumál, a death ode composed in his final throes using kennings that tied battlefield triumphs to ritual drinks, perhaps inspiring the custom where victors quaffed mead from polished crania to claim the fallen's valor, echoing the tree's gifts of wisdom. The quirky tidbit emerges like a hidden rune in fringe saga variants passed through Greenlandic storytellers. Ragnar's curved branches are said to reference enchanted horns grown from sacrificial trees, not bones, where drinking from them granted prophetic dreams. A magical twist that feels more like a Viking acid trip than straight history. Historians still argue whether these poetic layers indicate actual skull-drinking practices, or were embellished skaldic devices to elevate heroes, with debates centering on whether artifacts like the Osberg ship's horn fittings support literal interpretations or poetic license. The skald pauses for a breath, his fingers dancing lightly over the strings, creating a ripple of notes that mimic the sea's ebb, pulling your mind into a sleepy drift even as the imagery captivates. A light joke slips from his lips, sarcasm gentle. Ragnar sang of skulls while snakes nipped talk about a captive audience. Pity they didn't applaud. You chuckle softly, the sound blending with the waves, easing the tale's gravity as he resumes, his voice a murmur that soothes like a bedtime story laced with ancient edge. The connections call back vivid little the hall's toasts, the battlefield's trophies, the groves hangings all funneling into this song where curved branches symbolize conquest. Perhaps the why behind lifting a foe's skull, to drink deep of victory, turning death into defiance. You shift on the boulder, the sun warming your skin now, chasing away the morning chill, the air alive with the cry of gulls wheeling overhead like Odin's ravens scouting for lore. Another verse unfolds, Ragnar recounting raids where blood flowed like ale from branched vessels, decoding further the saga's code skulls as branches of the world tree, curved and hollow, filled with mead to honor the gods and mock the slain. The ASMR quality intensifies, each plucked string a soft caress, the skald's whispers slowing your breath, inviting drowsiness amid the poetry's far. Modern sarcasm creeps in again. We'd remix this death song into a podcast episode today, Ragnar's last hits, snakes and takes, complete with ads for energy drinks, no skulls required. As the song builds to its crescendo, you feel the immersion, complete teeth taste of salt on your lips from the breeze, the faint warmth of the fire's embers nearby, the lyre's hum vibrating in your chest like a heartbeat. One more light joke bubbles up, light and wry. If Ragnar shopped for poetic props, it'd be curved branches on sale by one skull. Get the saga free. The laughter fades into the wind, the verses wrapping around you like a cloak, revealing how this death song encodes the legend. Skulls and branches, a bridge to rituals, where drinking from enemies became a poetic boast. perhaps rooted in truth or twisted by time. The quirky fringe lingers in the echoes. Obscure oral editions claim Ragnar's ghost hunted those who misquoted his song, appearing in dreams to correct curved branches with visions of actual tree-grown horns, a supernatural nudge toward the myth's origins. And the scholarly debate persists, experts clashing over manuscript variations. Did 13th century scribes alter the imagery for drama? Or does it reflect 9th century realities unearthed in rare bone finds? The skald's voice trails off, the lyre silent now, leaving you in the peaceful hush of the fjord, the song's secrets decoded, pulling you toward revelations hidden in linguistic twists that birth the enduring myth. The fjord's hush lingers, as the skald packs his lyre, nodding farewell with a knowing smile, and you rise from the boulder, the sea's rhythm fading behind you as a narrow path beckons inland, toward a quiet scriptorium nestled in the hills. Mist curls around your ankles like curious spirits, the air turning cooler and damper, scented with the faint mustiness of old parchment and ink as you approach the stone building, its thatched roof sagging under the weight of time. Torchlight flickers through narrow windows, casting warm clothes on the ground, and you push the creaky door open, stepping into a room lined with shelves droning under stacks of manuscript seal-load pages bound in leather, runes, and Latin script mingling like uneasy allies. A scholar hunches over a table, quill scratching softly, his murmurs a soothing ASMR cadence that draws you closer, inviting you to explore the linguistic slip that twisted ancient words into the birth of a myth. You pull up a stool beside him, the wood creaking under your weight, and peer at the open tome, its pages illuminated by a sputtering candle that dances shadows across faded ink. The text before you is a fragment from the sagas, words in Old Norse that the scholar translates in a whispery voice, each syllable slow and deliberate, like rain pattering on leaves. Here, he says, finger tracing a line in the verses of Ragnar and others, the phrase bugir has curved trees of skulls or branches from the skull get mangled by later scribes. You lean in, feeling the paper's texture under your fingertips, rough and fragile, as he explains how this poetic kenning, meant to describe animal horns used as drinking vessels, was misread as literal human skulls, birthing the legend of Vikings quaffing from enemy crania. The mistranslation, amplified by 17th century Danish antiquarians like Ole Worm, spread through Europe, painting Norsemen as barbaric skull sippers, when it was really just flowery language for toasting with curved cow horns. The room feels cozy, almost womb-like, with the candle's warmth chasing away the chill, the scent of beeswax mingling with aged vellum to create a sensory cocoon that lulls your senses. Mainstream historical fact settles in like a familiar blanket. Linguistic errors in saga translations are common, as seen in the works of 19th century scholars like Samuel Lyne, who rendered Norse poetry into English with romantic flourishes, often distorting metaphors into literal horrors to captivate Victorian audiences hungry for exotic tales. But tonight, in this scriptorium, the error unveils itself gently, tying back to Ragnar's song where those curved branches were never bones but horns affixed to skull-like bases. A poetic device warped by time and tongue. A quirky tidbit bubbles up from the scholar's tales, in some fringe manuscript margins. Medieval monks doodled horned helmets on Vikings, another myth born from mistranslationaging warriors charging with bovine headgear. Though no such artifacts exist, just artistic license gone wild. Historians still argue whether this specific error stemmed from deliberate sensationalism or innocent phonetic slips, with no clear consensus on how deeply it altered perceptions of Norse culture. You stretch your arms, the stool shifting with a soft groan, and the scholar offers you a cup of herbal brew steaming and earthy, its warmth seeping into your palms as you sip, the flavor mild with hints of chamomile that ease you deeper into relaxation. Modern sarcasm drifts in. If mistranslations were a sport today, we'd have Olympics for it, gold medal to the guy who turned horn into head bowl, bonus points for scaring school kids, a light joke to lighten the air, picture a Viking at a feast, holding up a horn. Wait, This is from a cow. I thought we were going gourmet with enemy specials. The chuckles fade into the quill's rhythmic scratch, the ASMR quality pulling you toward drowsiness. Each word a gentle nudge toward understanding how one linguistic hiccup spawned the why behind the skull-drinking myth. As the scholar turns the page, revealing glossaries where Old Norse meets Latin, you see the evolution. Kennings like skull see for blood, or horn of the head for mead vessels. Blurred in Latin equivalents like cranium, leading translators astray. This error, unveiled in modern linguistics, reveals a custom rooted in poetry, not practice warriors drank from horns to evoke the wild, branching strength of Yggdrasil. Callbacks to the grove's offerings and Odin's rites, but never from actual skulls. The sensory details wrap around you, the flicker of candlelight on ink, making letters seem to breathe, the faint crackle of turning pages like whispers from ghosts, the bruised steam tickling your nose, inviting a yawn you let escape softly. The scholar's voice continues, sarcasm edging his tone. The power of a misplaced word turns poets into cannibals overnight. Another light joke slips in. If autocorrect existed in the Middle Ages, it'd probably suggest drink from scrolls instead, leading to a saga of paper-eating scholars. No thanks, you think with a smirk, the room's hush amplifying the humor. As the expiration deepens, you trace a finger along a corrected line, feeling the indentations of quill marks, where revisions attempt to right the wrong, but the myth had already taken flight, influencing everything from operas to your own imagined feasts in the long haul. In this quiet unveiling, the quirky fringe emerges again. Obscure etymological notes from Icelandic grimoires claim some kennings were protective spells, where saying skulls branch warded off Draugr, but mistranslations strip the magic, leaving only the macabre shell. The debate persists, scholars clashing in conferences over whether 16th century printers intentionally hiked the gore for sales, or if dialect variations in Norse caused the confusion. With evidence leaning both ways in fragmented codices, you lean back, the bruise comp spreading through your limbs, the mist outside now a soft veil against the window, the scriptorium's ambience a perfect cradle for reflection. As pages turn and whispers flow, the linguistic error stands bare, a pivotal twist in the legend's birth, guiding you toward encounters where the supernatural weaves into these Viking traditions, blending spirits with the echo of toasts long past. The scriptorium's candle flickers low, its flame sputtering as if weary from revelations, and you thank the scholar with a quiet word, stepping out into the gathering night where mist swirls thicker now like veils drawn by unseen hands. The path ahead twists through shadowed woods, drawing you toward a distant homestead glowing faintly with hearth light, the air heavy with the promise of stories yet untold. Your boots sink into soft moss, each step a muffled whisper, as the trees close in, their branches arching overhead like fingers laced in prayer warning. Soon, the homestead emerges, a sturdy longhouse with smoke curling lazily from its roof, and you approach the door, drawn by the hum of voices inside, where a gathering unfolds under the watchful eyes of pagan spirits. This is Thidrandi's fateful night, a saga moment where the supernatural brushes against the mortal, blending Dusartho's guardian spirits with the Viking traditions of drink and rite, echoing the linguistic twists that birthed our legend. You slip inside unnoticed, the door creaking softly like a sigh, and the warmth envelops you immediately, scented with pine resin from the fire and the yeasty aroma of ale fermenting in barrels along the wall. The room is alive with kinfolk huddled around the central hearth, flames crackling in a rhythmic ASMR dance that soothes your nerves, each pop a gentle punctuation to the murmurs. Thidrandi, the young warrior with eyes sharp as a raven's beak, stands near the high seat, his face etched with unease as he recounts a dream that lingers like fog geyser calling from the shadows. Urging caution on this very, you find a spot on a fur-draped bench, the pelt soft and warm against your back, feeling the pull of the tale as it unfolds. These spirits weaving into the fabric of feasts where toasts from curved vessels honor both the living and the ethereal. The gathering turns to merriment, horns passed hand to hand, filled with frothy ale that spills golden in the firelight, and you accept one, the vessel smooth and curved. Its tip cold against your lips as you sip the bittersweet brew. Thidrandy's voice rises above the chatter, a relaxed murmur laced with sarcasm, the Desir whisper of doom. Yet here we quaff as if tomorrow's assured fools or brave. Who can say? His words tie into the why of our expiration, how Vikings invoked these female spirits during drinks, perhaps from symbolic skulls, to seek protection or curse foes. Blending the supernatural with every swallow, the mainstream historical fact hums in the background. Desir were integral to Norse paganism, as evidenced by runestones like the one from Erkin, Sweden, dating to the 9th century, where they appear as fate weavers influencing battles and banquets much like family guardians in Viking households. As the night deepens, you feel the air shift, a chill creeping in despite the fire's glow, and shadows seem to dance with purpose along the walls. Thidrandy steps outside for a breath of air, and you follow, the door swinging shut behind you with a thud that echoes in the stillness. The yard is bathed in moonlight, frost glittering on the ground like scattered stars, and there by the Gata figures materialize from the mist, ethereal women cloaked in white, their forms shimmering as if woven from dreams. The Desir, harbingers of fate, approach with silent grace, their eyes glowing faintly, and Thidrandy draws his sword, but it's too late. A fateful clash ensues, not with blades but with destiny's touch, leaving him marked by the supernatural in a night that blends pagan lore with the rituals you've traced. Modern asides flicker in your mind. If Desir showed up at parties today, they'd be the ultimate buzzkills. No more ale for you. Fate says bedtime, ghosting the vibe like uninvited influencers. You watch from the shadows, heart pounding softly, the ASMR cadence of the wind through pines, a lullaby that calms even as tension builds, leaves rustling like whispered secrets. The encounter unfolds with Thidrandy defending the homestead, his cries muffled in the sub is telling, but here it feels vivid clash of unseen forces. The scent of ozone in the air like after a storm, the cold bite of night on your skin. This blends seamlessly with drinking traditions survivors would later toast from horns or perhaps those mistranslated skull vessels to appease the Desir, pouring libations that honored the spirits and warded off further wrath, a custom where mead bridged worlds. A quirky tidbit whispers through the mist. In fringe saga appendices, Desir were said to drink from hollow branches of the fallen, ethereal cups mirroring human rites, where sipping granted glimpses of the future, a supernatural happy hour that feels more like a Viking seance than history allows. The figures fade as dawn hints on the horizon, Thidrandy staggering back inside, his tale spilling out to wide-eyed listeners who refill horns in hasty toasts, the ale flowing freer now, laced with herbs that tingle on your tongue. You rejoin the bench, the fire's warmth seeping back in, easing the chill from your bones as stories circulate how Desir encounters often preceded great feasts or raids, their blessings sought through drinks that echoed the grove's sacrifices and Ragnar's verses. Historians still argue whether Thidrandy's night was a literal spirit visitation or a hallucinogenic dream induced by ritual brews, with no archaeological proof distinguishing myth from mushroom-tainted mead in Viking lore. Laughter bubbles up gently, sarcasm in the air. One elder quips, Desir at the door. Better than tax collectors, at least they don't demand silver. You smile, the joke light and sleepy, pulling you deeper into the immersion as another passes. Imagine texting about it today. Ghost ladies crash the party, send help or more ale. The chuckles blend with the fire's crackle. The room's ambience a cozy haze where sensory details linger, taste of lingering ale, the soft fur under your fingers, the distant howl of wind like a spirit's sigh. As the gathering winds down, you lean back, eyelids heavy from the ASMR whispers of embers and murmurs, the supernatural encounter a pivotal weave in the legend's tapestry. Desir, guardians of fate, intertwined with toasts that might have used those curved, mythical vessels, turning every drink into a pact with the beyond. One more light joke for the fading night. If Vikings had seer detectors, it'd be a horn that glows alert. Spirits incoming. Chug responsibly. The connections call back rich light mistranslations in the scriptorium, poetic branches in songs, grove hangings culminating here where pagan spirits elevate the act of drinking, perhaps from skulls in symbolic defiance. As dawn's light creeps in, the homestead quiets, pulling you towards saga feasts where horns contrast with legendary tales, the supernatural fading into memory's gentle embrace. Dawn's light filters through the homestead's shutters, casting a golden haze over the weary faces of the gathering, where tales of disseer fade into murmurs as the day stirs to life. You linger a moment longer, the fire's embers winking up like closing eyes, before slipping away, drawn by the pull of memory toward grander halls depicted in the sagas themselves, banks where legends feast eternal, contrasting the humble horns in your hand with whispers of those fabled skull vessels. The path brightens, leading you to a majestic longhouse atop a hill, its roof thatched with golden straw that shimmers in the sun, smoke rising in lazy spirals, as if beckoning you to partake. You push through the carved doors, entering a realm straight from the pages of the Eddas, where warriors of myth recline on benches laden with platters, the air rich with the aromas of spice meats, fermented berries, and the heady foam of mead that promises oblivion and insight in every draught. The hall stretches vast before you, timber walls hung with woven tales of gods and giants, the central fire pit roaring like a dragon's maw, flames leaping to illuminate faces etched with scars and secrets. You weave through the throng, finding a place among saga heroes, Sherald Fairhair perhaps, or figures from the Volsunga saga, their laughter booming as horns are raised in unison, curved and polished from the mighty oryx, tipped with silver to seal the base. You grasp one yourself, the horn heavy and smooth, the mead inside swirling as you lift it high, joining the toast to the slain whose shadows dance in our cups. The liquid cascades down, cool and effervescent, bubbling on your tongue with notes of honey and herbs that transport you deeper into the banquet's embrace. But amid the revelry, the contrast sharpened sheaths are real horns, as described in countless sagas, yet legends persist of skull vessels, those hollowed crania lifted in defiance, blending the everyday feast with the macabre myth that ties back to Thidrandi's spirits and the linguistic veils. As you partake, the sensory symphony unfolds, the sizzle of fat dripping onto coals, sending savory plumes upward, the soft thud of mugs on wooden tables, the warmth spreading through your chest like a storyteller's glow. The mainstream historical depiction in sagas like Egil's saga paints these banquets as communal bonds, where Viking society resolved disputes over ale, with archaeological evidence from the Gokstad ship burial revealing actual drinking horns buried with chieftains, symbols of hospitality that fueled alliances from Scandinavia to the British Isles in the 10th century. Yet, here in this saga-woven feast, the legendary skull vessels hover like ghosts, perhaps never real, but evoked in poetic contrasts to elevate the ordinary, suggesting warriors quaffed from enemy remains to absorb their might, a custom that feels tantalizingly close as you sip from your horn, imagining the chill of bone instead of keratin. You lean toward a bearded saga companion, his voice a relaxed ASMR murmur that soothes amid the din in these halls. We drink from the curve of fate, horns for the gods, skulls for the bold. Or so the skalds spin it, his sarcasm drips gently, like mead from an overfull cup, highlighting the divide between fact and fancy. A quirky tidbit surfaces in the chatter, in lesser-known saga interpolations from the Faroe Islands. Banquets featured echoing vessels where hollowed gourds mimicked skulls, filled with mead laced with hallucinogens to summon visions of Valhalla, a fringe practice that blurred the line between drink and divination. Historians still argue whether these saga feasts ever incorporated actual skull goblets, debating if rare bone artifacts from Swedish graves indicate ritual use or if the descriptions were hyperbolic flourishes to thrill listeners, with no definitive proof tipping the scales. The banquet swells around you, platters passed with roasted boar glistening in its juices, bread warm and crusty under your fingers, the fire's heat pressing close like an old friend's embrace. Modern asides flicker in your thoughts. If this were a dinner party today, we'd swap horns for stemless wine glasses, toasting scope while scrolling memes about Viking myths, no skulls. Just filters to make us look fierce. A light joke ripples through the group as one warrior spills his mead. Ah, the gods thirst too bitter, they drink from the floor, then from my foe's head, you chuckle softly, the sarcasm light, easing the immersion as another horn is refilled, the foam cresting like waves on a fjord. You rise to stretch, wandering the hall's length, eyes tracing the shields on the wall stented from epic clashes that call back to battlefield trophies and grove offerings, where real horns contrasted with legendary ones in every saga retelling. The why crystallizes further. Perhaps the skull vessels were symbolic, a way to contrast humble feasts with heroic boasts, turning every banquet into a stage for defying death through drink. The ASMR cadence of clinking horns and murmured verses lulls you, each sound a soft brush against your senses, inviting a yawn that you hide behind your hand. Another joke bubbles up from a skald nearby. Drink from a skull. Only if it's polished, nothing worse than brain bits in your brew. The laughter is gentle, blending with the fire's crackle, the air now thick with piped smoke that carries hints of tobacco-like herbs, earthy and calming. As you return to your seat, the feast deepens into night, stars visible through high windows like scattered runes foretelling more. You partake again, the horns curve familiar now, contrasting sharply with the imagined weight of a skull, cold and yielding, etched with the fallen's story. This saga depiction reveals layers. Banquets as arenas where real traditions met legendary embellishments. Horns for daily toasts, skulls for eternal lore. The quirky fringe lingers and whispers. Accounts from Orky sagas claim some feasts used whispering cups carved from whalebone to mimic crania, where echoes inside revealed omens when mead was poured, a supernatural quirk tying back to the seer encounters. And the debate rages on, scholars dissecting texts like the Heimskringla, questioning if Snorri Sturluson invented the contrast for narrative punch or drew from oral truths lost to time. You sink deeper into the bench, the fur cushioning you like a cloud, the banquet's rhythm slowing your pulse, the sensory details a tapestry taste of lingering sweetness on your lips, the faint hum of a lute in the corner, the warmth wrapping around like a sob is end. One more light joke for the evening. Imagine a Viking sommelier. This skull pairs well with victory, notes of revenge and a bitter finish. The smirks fade into contented sighs. The hall's ambience a perfect bridge from supernatural nights to scholarly debates, where feasts contrast myth with reality, pulling you toward reflections on how the legend evolved. The saga hall's merriment echoes faintly as you drift away, the night air crisp and carrying the scent of pine from the surrounding woods, pulling you toward a different gathering gone of minds rather than meat horns. You follow a lantern-lit path uphill to a stone-built academy, its walls etched with runes and Latin inscriptions, where scholars from distant lands convene under vaulted ceilings that arch like the ribs of a great longship. The door swings open with a groan, admitting you to a chamber glow with candlelight tables cluttered with open tomes, maps unrolled like ancient skins, and quills poised over parchments. Voices rise in measured debate, a symphony of accents blending Norse growls with scholarly Latin. As historians circle the question that's haunted your journey, did Vikings truly drink from the skulls of their enemies? Or was it all a shadow cast by words and wonders? You slip into a corner seat, the wooden chair creaking softly under you, feeling the room's energy hum like a distant storm, each argument a wave crashing against the shores of fact and fiction. The lead scholar, a weary man with spectacles perched on his nose, gestures to a yellowed manuscript, his voice a relaxed murmur laced with gentle sarcasm. Ah, the infamous skull beloved by bards, dreaded by the delicate. But let's dissect this beast, shall we? You lean forward, inhaling the musty aroma of aged paper mingled with the faint wax of dripping candles, as he unveils the core debate, drawing from sagas like the one you've traversed. Proponents point to scattered accounts, Byzantine chronicles describing Varangian guards quaffing from polished crania during triumphs, in Constantinople listing a ritual born of intimidation, where absorbing an enemy's essence through drink sealed dominance. Yet skeptics counter with linguistics, echoing the scriptorium's revelations. Those curved branches from skulls were mere kennings for animal horns, mistranslated by fearful monks to demonize the pagan north, turning poetry into perceived savagery. As the discussion heats, you trace your finger along a nearby map, its ink faded but vivid in depicting Viking routes from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean. Callbacks to raids where trophies were claimed but rarely documented as drinkware. The mainstream historical fact anchors the room. No direct archaeological evidence exists of Viking skullcups. Graves like those at Birka in Sweden yield horns and bowls of wood or clay, but never modified human crania for feasting, implying the practice, if real, was rare or symbolic rather than routine. But the quirky tidbit surfaces in a side conversation of fringe theory from 19th century folklorists claiming some Sami-influenced shamans in northern Scandinavia used reindeer skulls for ritual brews, blending indigenous customs with Norse rites in ways that might have inspired saga exaggerations. Though dismissed by most as cultural bleed rather than Viking core, you sip from a clay mug of watered wine passed around, its tartness grounding you amid the verbal fray, the ASMR cadence of turning pages, and hushed rebuttals lulling your senses like a soft rain on thatch. One scholar, her tone wry, quips, if every saga boast were true, we'd have more skullcups than helmets imaging the storage issues in a longhouse. The room chuckles lightly, the sarcasm easing tensions as arguments pivot to cultural contexts. Vikings honored the dead through mound burials and ship graves, not desecration, making literal skull-drinking clash with their worldview of fate and honor. Yet others argue for psychological warfare, displaying enemy remains to terrify foes, perhaps evolving into toasts during private rites. As hinted in the Orkneying, the saga's veiled references to drinking the defeated's wisdom. The debate swirls around you, sensory details immersing deeper. The flicker of candles casting elongated shadows that dance like debating spirits. The scratch of quills on vellum, rhythmic and soothing. The faint chill seeping through stone walls, countered by the warmth of clustered bodies. Modern asides flicker in your mind. We'd fact-check this on Wikipedia mid-argument today. But back then it was all oral clashes, no edit buttons, just endless scrolls. Historians still argue whether the custom originated from Scythian influences encountered during Eastern trades, as Herodotus described similar steppe nomad practices in the 5th century BCE, or if Christian chroniclers like Adam of Bremen fabricated it to justify crusades against pagans, with textual analysis tilting toward the latter but leaving room for isolated truths. You shift in your seat, the wood worn smooth by countless seekers, as a young academic unfurls a reproduction of a saga illumination where he's toasting under Yggdrasil, horns aloft, but one figure ambiguously holding what could be a rounded vessel, sparking fresh volleys. "See here," he says, voice dropping to that sleepy whisper. The ambiguity fuels us. Was it bone or boast? The quirky fringery emerges. Obscure Icelandic grimoires suggest skull ale as a euphemism for berserker potions brewed in hollowed gourds mimicking heads, grunting battle frenzy without literal gore. A pharmacological twist that intrigues but lacks proof. And the sarcasm flows gently from an elder. Debate all you want if Vikings did it. They probably regretted the morning after no aspirin in Valhalla. As candles burn lower, wicks sputtering like fading breaths, you feel the pull of cohesion. Cowbacks to Thidrandi's Desir, who might have blessed such rites if real, to Ragnar's verses, where poetry veiled practice, to grove sacrifices, where trees bore the weight of myths. The why persists. If true, it was about transcendence, conquering death through consumption. If false, a legend that humanized the fearsome by adding a touch of the grotesque. A light joke punctuates a pause. Picture a Viking at a skullcup symposium. This vintage has notes of vengeance, pairs well with regret. Smiles ripple through the ASMR quality of the room, deepening with yawns stifled behind hands, the air now heavy with the scent of extinguished flames. The scholars circle back to evidence lack of bone modifications in digs versus saga hyperbole, leaving the question open, a scholarly stalemate that invites endless exploration. You rise slowly, limbs heavy from the immersion, the debate's rhythm echoing in your pulse as you step toward the door. The night outside a canvas for reflections on how this argument shapes the legend's legacy, fading into historical whispers that calm rather than alarm. The Academy's debates linger in your ears like fading echoes as you step out into the starlit night, the path winding downward toward a serene lakeside where reflections dance on still waters, inviting you to ponder the skull-drinking myth's enduring legacy. You settle on a mossy bank, the ground soft and yielding beneath you, the cool air carrying the faint murmur of waves lapping gently. A natural ASMR symphony that soothes your thoughts into a reflective drift. Here, away from the clamor of scholars and sagas, the legend unfolds in your mind like an ancient scroll unrolling slowly how a simple poetic flourish born in the fires of Viking halls evolved through centuries of retelling, morphing from kennings of curved horns into tales of gruesome goblets that captivated the world. You gaze at the water's surface, rippling with moonlight, seeing glimpses of how this story spread, carried by fearful monks in their chronicles, amplified by Renaissance antiquarians hungry for the exotic, and romanticized in Victorian novels where Norsemen became symbols of wild freedom, their supposed skull drinks a badge of untamed spirit. As you lean back against a weathered stone, fingers trailing in the damp grass, the evolution sharpens the myth, persisting not despite its dubious roots, but because of them, weaving into popular culture like threads in a tapestry. Think of how it inspired operas like Wagner's Ring Cycle, where gods quaff from symbolic vessels echoing Odin's wisdom, or modern films portraying Vikings as skull-swigging berserkers, a far cry from the archaeological truth of simple horn toasts unearthed in Danish bogs. The mainstream historical fact grounds this legacy. The legend's spread can be traced to 17th century works like Olaus Magnus's Historia de Gentibus Septentrionalibus, which sensationalized Norse customs for European audiences, turning mistranslated sagas into enduring stereotypes that influenced everything from literature to heavy metal lyrics. Yet, as you breathe in the night's freshness, mingled with the subtle scent of wildflowers, the myth fades gently into calming truth revealed by linguists and digs as poetic exaggeration. A way for Vikings to boast without the bone, their real rituals centered on community and gods, not gore. The lake whispers softly, each wavelet a sigh that pulls you deeper into contemplation. The ASMR quality of the water's rhythm, blending with distant all calls to create a lullaby for your wandering mind. This enduring tale evolved from Ragnar's verses and grove sacrifices, serves as a mirror to our own fascination. Show we embellish the past to suit our narratives, turning warriors into monsters or heroes as needed. A quirky tidbit drifts in on the breeze. In some 20th century fringe anthropology, the myth linked to Siberian shamanic practices where animal skulls held sacred brews, suggesting cultural exchanges along Viking trade routes that might have flavored the legend. Though dismissed as speculative fancy by most, historians still argue whether this evolution reflects genuine oral distortions or deliberate myth-making by outsiders. But in the quiet, it all softens to a historical truth. Vikings celebrated life fiercely, their drinks symbols of bond and bravery, the skull element a faded shadow that adds flavor without substance. You chuckle inwardly at the thought, modern folks clinging to the myth for Halloween props, skull mugs filled with coffee instead of mead, a light sarcasm in how we've tamed the wild into merchandise. If only they knew, you muse, it was horns all along, less dramatic but easier to clean. The joke eases the reflection. Callbacks to the hall's feasts and Thidrandi's spirits weaving a cohesive end, where the legend's why dissolves into understanding. It endured to remind us of humanity's love for the dramatic, fading now into evidence-based calm, where truth whispers louder than tall tales. Stars reflect in the lake like scattered memories, and you stretch out, the grass cradling you gently, the night's peace enveloping like a woolen blanket. Another light joke bubbles up. Imagine a Viking time traveler seeing out plastic skull cups. What sorcery is this? No enemy slain, yet you drink from heads. The sarcasm is soft, blending with the water's hush. As the myth's legacy settles, evolved through mistranslations and debates, it now rests as a calming footnote in history's vast saga, inviting us to sip from knowledge rather than bone. The quirky fringe lingers one last time. Obscure modern theories posit the legend as a metaphor for psychological conquest, drinking in an enemy's mind through study of their ways. An intellectual twist that ties back to Odin's sacrificial quest for runes. But as debates quiet in your thoughts, the scholarly divide fades. Experts may quibble over origins, but the truth comes. No widespread skull-drinking, just poetic prowess that enchanted the ages. You close your eyes, the lake's rhythm sensing with your breath, the enduring myth now a gentle companion. Its evolution a journey from shadow to light, where historical truth emerges soothing and queer. As the stars twinkle softly above, their light dimming like candles at the end of a long feast, you feel the weight of the legend lift from your shoulders, leaving only a peaceful whisper in its wake. The lake's gentle lapping slows to a hushed murmur, each wave stretching longer, inviting your thoughts to unwind like threads from an ancient loom, drifting into the quiet expanse of night. No more echoes of clashing swords or spirited toasts, just the calm assurance that history, with all its twists and tales, settles into truth as surely as dawn follows darkness. Let the myths fade now, dear listener, into the comforting arms of understanding, where Vikings become not monsters of lore, but people of the past, their customs woven from necessity and poetry, not the macabre fantasies we've spun. Breathe deeply, feel the cool air fill your lungs, carrying away the last remnants of adventure, replacing them with serenity's soft embrace. Your eyelids grow heavier with each passing moment, the world's edges blurring into a dreamy haze, as sleep creeps in on silent feet, promising restful visions untroubled by skulls or sagas. Allow yourself to surrender, floating on this tranquil current, where every breath draws you deeper into repose, the night's velvet curtain drawing close. Good night, wanderer of old tales. May your dreams be as gentle as the fjord's caress.